Hello, this is Dr. Dennis Bielfeldt of the Christ School of Theology. You're watching a lecture here that is really a bridge lecture between the late medieval nominalistic standpoint of Occam, moving towards the beginnings of modern science and finally culminating in the birth of modern philosophy. So back to Occam just very briefly. If you've looked before in our lectures, I did have a couple lectures on Occam. I want to review a couple points here, actually more than that, because it's very important as we move forward that we know from where we've come, right? Occam, of course, is oftentimes referred to as a nominalist, and I like that term. He believes that the only things that actually exist are particulars, particular substances having particular qualities. He believes that written words signify, that is, make the mind think about, spoken words, which themselves signify, ad placetum, concepts in the mind. So mental language is finally signified by spoken words. And then the mental language, the concepts in the mind, signify things in the world. And if you looked at the former lectures, we distinguished between primary and secondary signification. I won't go into that here. Okay, substance, species, and relations become in some sense metaphysical constructs for Occam. He countenances the reality only of individuals. He has knowledge of intuitions. You can have knowledge of intuitions, intuitional knowledge. Now, when I talk about intuitions here, it's intuitional knowledge, actually, of objects in the world. This would be something close, I think, to what Russell would talk about under the category of knowledge by acquaintance. One has a non-inferential, direct acquaintance with objects in the world. So one can do that with Occam, or one can have knowledge of propositions and how propositions relate to each other. This is an abstractive knowledge rather than an intuitional knowledge. And of course, he is very important for many philosophers, Occam. They see him as one of the great lights, that was starting to get it right after the Dark Ages, the darkness of the Dark Ages. Causality for Occam tends to be understood more in terms of regular sequences. Motion, space, and time become analyzable quantitatively, not qualitatively. So this is all looking forward to the birth of modern science. For Occam, there are no certain proofs of God's existence or the soul's immortality, and because there are no such proofs, finally these things can only be known by external revelation. So we talked a bit about how Occam has this fideistic element to his thinking, right? Okay, we talked, when we talked about Occam and we talked about Scotus, we talked about various kinds of distinctions. You'll remember these things. We had a so-called real distinction, then we had a formal distinction, and then we had a rational distinction, right? Just hold on here again. If you already know this, well, you don't have to listen very much. There is a real distinction between the common nature in a thing and what individuates the thing, according to many philosophers, right? So the real distinction would say that one can separate, right, the common nature of the thing from the bearer of that common nature, if you will. There's a real metaphysical separation. So if you're a medieval realist, you're going to give ontological status to common natures, and you're going to give ontological status to bearers. And you're going to say that, well, that the universal, if you will, can exist extra res, outside the thing. Extra rem. There we go. Singular. The rational distinction, which we maybe can associate here with Thomas, is a distinction in reason between the common nature and the thing, and the bearer. So while the common nature cannot be separated out metaphysically from the bearer, the human mind can make this distinction between the common nature and the bearer, and this distinction is something that is given by the human mind. It's not out in the world, if you will. And so while this is an irreducible reality, the common nature and its bearer together, we can, because we have reason, make a distinction between facets of this thing, if you will. So it's classificatory. Then, with the formal distinction, of course, we talked about this with our friend Scotus, there is a common nature and a bearer. And like the rational distinction, you cannot separate the common nature from the bearer in reality. But like the real distinction, right, the common nature and the bearer have some kind of metaphysical independence, even though they're not separable. There's a metaphysical independence, if you will, of these things that is a bit more like this. So there is something in the thing that our minds track with when we separate the common nature from the bearer. There is an objective component here. And so this is like the real distinction, but it's like the rational distinction because you can't really separate. So this is, of course, this great insight or mistake, depending on your position, your metaphysics here, of Scotus. He comes with a formal distinction. Well, Occam rejects all of these, right? He rejects all three positions, he states that individual things really are individual, and the mind merely classifies resembling individuals under universal concepts. He overturns the Aristotelian potency, form, or actuality dichotomy. So that dichotomy between form and matter. Form is merely now the shape of matter. And with Occam, the universe metaphysically is really quite simple, just particulars and particular qualities. So there's a movement away from metaphysics towards semantics, right? What's important now is how we talk about these things. And we'll come right back next time and talk a little bit about Occam on language, just review this material and then go forward. Thank you. I'm Dr. Dennis Bielfeldt of the Christ School of Theology.